are live. It's David from Race Set Go Adventures. Welcome to Adventure Live. Our guest today, 12-time U.S. national champion and winner of the 2015 Xterra World Champion, Josiah Middaugh. Josiah, welcome from Colorado. How are you doing today?
Great. Thanks for having me, David. Happy to be here.
Thank you so much. I'm going to talk about a number of topics. Maybe a good place to start is kind of your origins, kind of growing up. What was your background before getting into the wonderful world and craziness of multisport?
So I came from a running background, grew up in Northern Michigan, went to Central Michigan University and ran, cross country, indoor track, outdoor track there. Spent a lot of my college career injured, which kind of drew me towards cross training, triathlon. And one of my big regrets is spending too much time aqua jogging and not enough time actually swimming laps. I was that adult onset swimmer, unfortunately. But everything kind of changed when I moved to Colorado. Right out of school, was in really good run shape, but very humbled my first few events and learning how to swim, learning how to mountain bike. But yeah, it's been an amazing journey.
Awesome. When did you do your first off-road try? What was that experience like?
So summer of 2000, I graduated college, got married, and moved to Colorado all in the same week. And Keystone was my first Xterra, and that was on a mountain bike I bought at the pawn shop for about $400, which I thought was, that had to be top of the line, $400. I can't imagine a bike that costs more than that. So no, it was a very humbling experience. Again, that was a lot of side stroke in the swim, which is not one of the 4 strokes. And if anybody has done that event or remembers it, Keystone, the swim is about 9,000 feet, and it goes up from there. It goes over 11,000 feet on the bike. So the water is about 53 degrees, and if you're not a strong swimmer, it's probably wasn't the best race to do. It's like the perfect storm for having a panic attack in the water.
Yeah. Just try and speak up a little bit. I'm just getting some texts that a little harder to hear you. So just talk a little bit loud. So, but appreciate it. So, just thinking about that, what's your recommendation? When we get, at We Over Yonder, which is nationals this year, we get probably about 25-30% are first-time off-road triathletes. What do you recommend for people kind of doing this the first time?
Yeah, so Xterra especially, or off-road triathlon, they attract people from running and biking backgrounds primarily. So for a lot of people, they're in the same boat. So I think they can at least take a little bit of comfort knowing that they're not the only ones that, it's going to be a challenge getting through the water. And so I have a series of tips, and one is when the gun goes off, you don't have to start when the gun goes off. So I always, let the gun go off, count to 3, count to 10, jump in the water and start at an intensity that you want to keep for the whole race. And especially if you're at higher altitude, you go out hard for 1 or 2 minutes, you're going to pay a huge price going into oxygen debt. And the same thing happens at sea level too. With a wetsuit, cold water, that's the toughest scenario for, you feel like you're being choked. You have a hard time keeping your face in the water. Make sure you're blowing bubbles out. So bubbles, bubbles, breathe, bubbles, bubbles, breathe. When you turn to breathe, you want to stay on that long axis, but you can turn your face all the way up to the sky if you want and take a little bit more time on that breath. I mean, the pool swimmers might not like that tip, but you gotta do what you gotta do. And I think getting air is the biggest concern. And most people, it's getting enough air out is a bigger problem, not getting the air in.
Probably that, and also probably spotting the buoys. Like you're saying, that the ones going from pool swimming to open water.
Yeah, and stage yourself accordingly. Don't get on the front row if you're not, collegiate or a high school level swimmer. Don't be in that top 10 staging area. Get in a second row, a third row, or position yourself way outside. I breathe on the right 90% of the time. So I like to stage far to the left so I can keep an eye on my competitors. Some people say stage on the right side so you don't have to look at them. But that way I don't have to sight as much. I can keep an eye on that main swim pack and not have to sight as much. And it's just a little bit more comfortable for me.
Okay. Thank you. Maybe just talking about, so when did you transition from being an amateur to going pro with the off-road and the Xterra tries?
Yeah, 2003 was my first year racing professionally.
Okay. What was that like, and what was that transition like?
It was a pretty good transition because I felt like I was ready a year before, and I really wanted to get my pro card that year before, and I was comparing myself to the elite athletes at that time anyways, and I knew that I could compete in that group. And at that time I didn't have goals of, winning the world championship, or, I just thought maybe I could get on that pro podium at some of those big regional races. And I just wanted to compare myself to the best in the sport. And that was my driving force initially, was just to be as good as I could possibly be. And I knew getting into that pro wave was the way for me to find out a little bit more about myself.
Nice. So just kind of like pushing yourself and that kind of the, chasing a rabbit or the stick behind you, right? Seems to yield, whether it's mountain bike racing or off-road racing, I think it's all very true that you find yourself amongst the competition and you push, right?
Right.
So,
yeah, I kind of progressed that year and, had a lot of top 10 finishes. And then the next year I won my first regional race, was actually that race in Keystone, the same one I had that panic attack in. So that was 2004. And it was at that time, every race was like the world championship, because Xterra in the US was the only thing going. So we had this regional series. Keystone was the mountain championship, and we had everybody in the world that was, at the top of the sport was in that race. And so that was a pretty sweet moment to, have never been on the podium, to go up and win the race, especially on that local course.
Yeah. And that was before the Beaver Creek race started?
Yeah. So eventually that race in Keystone was moved to Ogden, Utah, and then it was moved to Beaver Creek for the mountain championship.
Gotcha. So, and certainly not a bad home course, having the one right there in Beaver Creek. Then obviously you've done phenomenally well on all of the U.S. courses, whether it was Beaver Creek or out in Ogden at Nationals or down in Alabama. What about what would you say your favorite course has been outside of the U.S.?
Oh, outside of the U.S. One thing that's cool about Xterra is that there's some amazing destination races, and Xterra has definitely taken me all over the world. But some of my favorites, that Pan American series that they had the last few years was a pretty fun series, because it was amazing destinations. Went to Costa Rica, Dominican Republic, and just really fun courses, but also just really fun environments to be in, and good to see Xterra through the lens of another country too. And there's a lot of excitement around the world about it. So it's been a lot of fun. I don't know. I probably about 10 years ago, I made the decision. At that time, I was good on certain courses, not good on others. So, I was good on the high mountain courses or the courses with massive amounts of elevation gain. And I decided I want to be good on every course, and I want to have a shot at winning every race that I'm in. And so, shoring up some of the weaknesses with, technical mountain biking and, flat run speed, and just so I could be good on a climbing course, on a flat course, on a twisty turny course. And so I try not to say, I'm only good on this one type of course. And I think when you stretch, out all three disciplines, if you're a well-rounded athlete, you should be able to perform well on any type of course.
Okay. And you're certainly well-rounded. obviously, and people probably don't know this, that you're also one of the top snowshoe racers, but also you've thrown your hand into fat bike racing too. And I know I was talking to Will Ross about the Fat Bike World Championships at Crested Butte from earlier this year, which you won. Can you tell me a little bit about that experience, and are you thinking of doing more fat bike racing in the coming years?
Absolutely. Fat biking, whenever I ride by somebody on a fat bike, they say, wow, that looks like fun.
It
and
is.
Usually I say, it looks like more fun than it is because it's a lot of work. But for me, I spend so much time inside on the trainer in the winter that I love to get outside once a week, even if it's a pain in the butt to put the winter clothes on, and your heart rate might not be as high and you're moving super slow, but it's a good way to stay warm on the bike in the winter. So for a cyclist, best way to get off a trainer. But the misconception is that you can get on a fat bike and go anywhere you want to go. And that's not true. You have to have, usually you're a second or third trail user. So there has to be, either some type of grooming or a really well packed out snowshoe trail or a golf course, Nordic trail or something like that to be able to actually have fun and enjoy yourself out there.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, I was up at Kingdom Trails up in Vermont, and they had, they plow that whole region, and yeah, it's a game changer. I mean, I've done rides in snow, first tracks and all that, but after that, once if we get a lot of snow, if it's not packed out, it's it's definitely not easy. What would you say? Do you find that being a coach yourself and as well, do you find that that's a great strength building and good conditioning exercise as well, especially in the winter?
Yeah, again, a great way to get off the trainer, but also for most people, you're immediately into like a tempo zone when you're pushing all that rolling resistance. So it's really good. Even doing really mellow climbing, you might be on a 3-4% grade. It's like being on a 10% grade on a mountain bike. So it's a lot of work, and I'll even occasionally take my fat bike out in the summer and do some threshold hill climbing intervals on it, just because the bike's heavier, more rolling resistance, and it's a heck of a workout.
And what fat bike are you riding?
So I actually have the 907 bike, which is a bike shop in Alaska. And actually so Will Ross used to work there, and got to know the owner. I actually coached the owner's wife for some Xterras. I met them at the Xterra World Championship, small world. But he hooked me up with a fat bike frame, and it's an amazing, super light bike.
Cool. Yeah, those are supposed to be amazing bikes. Awesome.
And then I paired it with the Envy wheels, which is really a game changer. Those their Envy fat bike wheels are top notch.
I'm jealous. Hence the name, right?
Yeah, I mean, a big difference from going from a 35-pound bike to a 25-pound bike.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. So I'm just going to shift gears for a sec. Obviously, you've been 12-time U.S. champion. Obviously, you had the win in 2015 at Worlds. But what I can say in looking at your career, you've been extremely consistent. Even, today, you're still amongst the top in the world. What do you attribute, your consistency to performing at that level for so long?
A couple things. I think one, I've kind of kept a pretty narrow focus with my racing, and really focused on that, 2 to 3 hour range for races. So I haven't, completely burned myself out, focused on an event that's way too long. And that's allowed me to be specific with my training, but also I've avoided overtraining. And I think one of the reasons I've kept a fair amount of balance, I've always worked. I have a family, I have 3 kids, and it's good and bad, right? But it means that my training time is a little bit more limited. I need to take a more scientific approach. I can't train 30 hours a week. So I get the same kind of stimulus with training, 15 to 20 hours a week, which is a lot for an age group athlete. But when you look at the pros that I'm competing against that are doing it 100% full time, I'm more like 60% of their training load.
Yeah.
Which sounds like a negative, but again, I think that's contributed to my longevity because it's been consistency over time. But I think I've really prevented a lot of that burnout and the, like the adrenal fatigue or the, overtraining syndrome. I do a little bit of overreaching, but I don't do those just heavy training blocks over and over and over again. And that's where you see athletes, they come out on like a bright light on the scene, and they have some amazing performances for 2 or 3 years, and then you never hear of them again.
Right.
And I've just been a little bit more of a slow burn over a longer period of time. And also one other, sorry to keep rambling, but I think that I've always considered myself a late bloomer, and people assume that I was, super fast as I ran in college, but I wasn't a good runner until my senior year of high school. Started off real slow. And even then I didn't go to college on a running scholarship. I went on an academic scholarship. I struggled to make the varsity team. I was a good runner, but I wasn't a great runner. And I left my college career feeling pretty unfulfilled. So I had the motivation there, but also I think it took me a lot longer. I was 37 when I won the world championship, and that was on my 15th try on that course. So I just think that people have different trajectories, and mine was a little bit shallower and just took me a lot longer to get to the top of that top level.
Yeah. And that must have been amazing, fulfilling that goal after being on your 15th try. I mean, there's not a lot of people that have gotten to the world championships, B, compete, and then C, to win it. What do you think, besides obviously that sort of training, what do you think was different? Obviously, and I think the year before you were second. Is that right?
I think, yeah,
I know it all blurs together, doesn't it?
It does. I think I was second to Ruben Rizzato the year before. I had a lot of years that I was knocking on the door, and I finished third at the World Championships, and I don't know, I think that was 2006 or 7. So, but I went those early years. My goal was to get on the podium, and I felt like I had to have a breakthrough day to win the World Championship. And then I spent a lot of time thinking, well, I'm as good as anybody. I can win this race, but I wasn't winning the race. So then, around 2012, I was second to Gomez. And I felt like I should have won the race that year. But I kind of went back and I said, well, I want to do everything right and really go all in for that World Championship. And I did that from then on. And it was, a change of mindset. It wasn't like I'm going in saying I'm going to win, but I knew that I was as strong as anybody in the race. But I couldn't just say, well, I'll win it one of these years. I had to go and say, I'm going to win it this year. But I probably did that for about 5 years in a row before I actually won it.
Well, it's an amazing story, and I'm sure like many, we're celebrating. It's there's a lot of amazing competitors, and certainly, throughout the world. Even as far as a U.S. competitor, I think before that, I think the last U.S. win was in 2000. So, it's right. So it's quite an achievement. Well, let's shift. We're talking a little bit about something that you've got kind of on your goals, something coming up a little over about 9 days from now. You mentioned that you're going to be doing an Everesting attempt. Maybe before start, just describe exactly what it is. Everyone may know what that involves and what entails, and maybe talk to what it is and kind of how you have planned to attack that.
Yeah, so everybody knows Mount Everest, the tallest mountain in the world, but it's about 29,029 feet. And I guess it grows every year. So next year it's going to be taller. So I got to do it this year. But no, I'm not going to climb Everest, but I'm going to climb the vertical ascent of Everest by repeating the same climb. And so the idea is that you go up and down the exact same route, and you accumulate over 29,000 vertical feet. in one attempt. So it means not doing it over multiple days, not sleeping in between, but it's one shot going up and down the climb, which is a pretty huge, it's a huge day. And normally I would really steer clear of something like that, because in the middle of a race season, it would be complete sabotage.
Right.
But, you know, these are uncertain times. And the 23rd would actually have been my first Xterra in Alabama. And so Rebecca Rush, who's also an NV-sponsored athlete, she kind of put out this challenge to have this Everesting attempt, and you could do half Everest or, you know, a shorter version and make a challenge your own. But she's doing it on that Memorial Day weekend. And so I saw that, and I, like anything, if you see something, you know, once, you might not pay attention. You see it twice, you start to pay attention. The third time, you know, it really got the wheels turning. And I said, well, why not? It's a good challenge. A lot of times I'll go out in my training, and I live in a place where I can rack up altitude gain pretty quick, and just I can not go any further than 10 miles from my home and not repeat the same climb and get 10,000 feet of climbing in about 4 hours, maybe four and a quarter, something like that. And so I like to do that every couple of weeks, to do something like that. And 29,000 feet is a whole lot more than 10,000. But I thought, well, I like to do that type of training anyways, and it might actually be a good fit for me.
Awesome. And also it's raising money for charity, right? As part of that.
That's the whole thing, is that, you know, how can we make this, you know, something where it's not just about me, but also there's some accountability to something bigger than myself. And, you know, during these times, you know, could we raise money for a good cause? And I've always been affiliated with Starting Hearts organization. That's a local charity here. And so I'm going to partner with the Rebecca's event, but I'm also going to partner locally with the Vail Valley Foundation and Starting Hearts organization, and try to raise some money for a good cause.
If you have a link for that, please share it to me. We'll definitely donate to that, and we'll put it up on the site and share it to all our athletes.
Cool. Yeah, and I've got a handful of my own coached athletes that are going to participate in some way. I have 3 of my athletes actually going for the whole thing, but they'll all be doing it in their own locations. So one athlete in Japan doing it, another guy in Tahoe, one guy here locally, he'll be doing it on a different climb. And then Brian and Jenny Smith in Gunnison they're gonna split it. They're gonna do Everest on a team. So yeah, it'll be fun. We'll have people all around kind of suffering at the same time.
I love it. I love it. I think that brings us all together, and it does. It gives us something positive to outlook. You know, it's and I'm sure you deal with it with your athletes, being a coach. Maybe that's something I want to talk a little bit about. I mean, obviously with your brother, you have Middaugh coaching, and how are athletes, you know, just getting their mindset and how they deal with the pandemic, and how has that shifted the training regimens that you're recommending?
Yeah, I think it's been tough for everybody, and I think it's hard to replace a race, and you really can't. I mean, racing is, for most of the people that I coach and for myself personally, I feel like racing is important, and it gives a goal and gives a focus. And without racing, it's tough, and it's tough for everybody. Some people, it's more of a challenge mentally, because they throw their hands up in there and say, well, what's the point? But that's a big thing that I've been trying to get across, is that, you know, we all need to shift our mindset, and you need to shift it on the process. And, you know, it's about, you know, digging a little bit deeper into those goals. You know, if your goal is just to go out and beat the neighbor down the street, then having a race canceled is devastating, because all of your motivation is external, and you want kudos and you want gratification for that race, and you want to post it on social media, and that's gone. But you got to dig a little deeper and say, why am I really doing this? Is this a lifestyle change? Is this, you know, part of what makes me tick? What is it part of, you know, how I identify, you know? And so I think whether or not there's a race, there will be a race, right? But it might not be in 3 months. It might not be in 6 months. So my first feeling when this all hit was, I had the same kind of sense that I did during some of my injuries and recovering from some of those, and not knowing, like, will I be able to race 6 months from now? Is this going to be, is this season scrapped? Am I really training for next year? And I think always focusing on what you can do, not focusing on what you can't. And every day, like, what are you doing today to be a better version of yourself for tomorrow? And so that means being engaged in the process. And what's tough, though, is not having those intermittent goals and not having those rewards. I always say the race is the reward. And so having things to look forward to and something to have a sense of accomplishment from. And so I'm really encouraging people to come up with some of their own challenges. And I mean, I can give them to them and write them on their training calendar, but I want them to be part of the process. So I just had a guy who did a half Ironman because his half Ironman was canceled, and he didn't swim, but he rode 56 miles and ran 13.1 on the same day as his event. And, just having those things where you're getting out, you're accomplishing something, and you're also looking forward to things.
No, it makes sense. I mean, this week and this Saturday was the original date for USA Triathlon Off-Road Nationals, which was way over yonder. There'll probably be a small group heading to the park to do the race loop. Highly recommend it. PM me if you want to join. Be a small group, but you're right. Just at least getting out there and continuing forward and keeping the activity and at least enjoying it and replicating or doing a virtual version, as close as you can. We actually added a virtual race, a short sprint race of that sort for charity, just to give something a little different for the racers, something to focus and keep the community connected. But unfortunately, what's going to happen is, a lot of the races have either canceled or postponed. Nationals we postponed to September 13. So now you're going to have a very compacted race schedule. And you're going to have situations where, normally you'd have weeks or a month between races. Now you're going to have, a week or two. Any adjustments that you're recommending or would recommend to athletes that are, taking on races of this caliber so close together?
Yeah, it kind of depends on what they're doing right now. But, keeping that in mind, we're middle of May right now.
Yep.
So the mindset has to be like, how would your mindset be back in, January or February when you have a race in June or July? That's kind of where we're at now. And so, no, we don't have to be in peak form, but I'm a big fan of staying in shape year round, as you can probably tell. But
yep.
Like I say, keep your performance, your fitness in a pretty narrow range. But right now, we don't have to be ready to race this weekend.
Right.
But I always, with my athletes, I'm thinking be in good enough shape, have the consistent intensity and the consistent volume so that you could do something a month out. So we could totally shift gears, put in one heavy block of training, and be ready to fire on all cylinders, right? And so that means I'm not stacking up these really intense blocks of training where we have these daunting, like hard threshold or interval workouts, back to back to back right now. But we're sprinkling that intensity in, and maybe we're finding some more fun ways to get that intensity. Maybe it's doing a Strava segment. Maybe it's doing your local neighborhood loop at, your fastest pace, for a 5K or a 10K or something. So we're visiting those intensity levels, but we're not hammering these really hard blocks. But when that race schedule opens back up, we're ready to put in a block of training and be ready to race.
Sounds great. Thank you. Speaking of racing, what does your pre-race ritual look like? You get to the race, and what does that look like for you, and what do you recommend for triathletes?
Yeah, so I'm not somebody has to be completely regimented, or it's not like the baseball player has to have his lucky socks, or something like that. Don't believe in luck, but I do believe in science, and I believe in doing something that you're familiar with. And so I keep it fairly simple. And you might even say kind of old school. You know, the night before I'm having a high carb meal, and quite often it's pasta, but it doesn't have to be. It can be a different version of that. I don't steer too clear of gluten. You know, I'm focused on getting carbs from a lot of different sources that day before the race, staying normally hydrated, making sure I have enough electrolytes in the system. And then race morning, it depends on the timing of the event, but I'm getting that meal somewhere between 2 and 3 hours before the event. And it's usually something simple like oatmeal. You know, maybe there's some nuts and fruit in there. Maybe it's even a yogurt and granola, something like that. But for me personally, the dairy doesn't bother me, the gluten doesn't bother me. And so I'm sticking with those familiar. A longer event, there's more calories. If I have more time to digest, there's more calories. But if it's, you know, a local 5K, I want that digestive system clear. So I'm just, that morning meal is topping off your carbohydrate stores. So through the night, you deplete the stores a little bit. Now you're just topping off some already high carbohydrate stores. And then you're trying to get that digestive tract mostly clear before the race starts. So if it's a short race, you want to have nothing in the system. So you don't want blood flow going to the resting and digesting. You want it going to the working muscles. But when the event's longer, you know that you can't operate at, you know, 100% for more than 90 minutes, or, you know, 100% of your threshold capacity for more than 90 minutes. So you're going to have to be putting something into the system. So you got to be topped off when you start, and you got to be consistent with that nutrition throughout the event. And if we're talking 3 hours plus, then you got to make sure that you start early with that nutrition and you keep it really consistent. And I'm looking at maybe 200 up to 300 calories per hour during the race itself.
What do you find is your favorite form of products, gels, you know, cubes, etc.? What race day nutrition? What do you find you're using the most?
Yeah, so First Endurance has my plug, has been my sponsor for a long time. It's actually been my longest sponsor my entire professional career, which has been awesome for the events that I do. If I do an Xterra, if I do something in the 2 to 3 hour range, I'm going 100% liquid or gel. That's going, so I'm not chewing anything. And so they have their liquid gel shot, which is a little bit, it's not as thick as a gel. So it's a 400 calorie flask. But I'll get their sports drink really high in electrolytes. And that gets me close to that, like 500 milligrams of sodium per hour that I'm trying to get. And so I'll have, you know, at least one water bottle of fluid on the bike, at least 200 calories per hour that I'm taking in. And I'm trying to do mostly liquid calories when I race. Something as intense as Xterra, I don't have any energy for chewing.
Interesting. And by the way, you turned me on to the EFS Pro Cucumber, which sounded really strange, but it's really good. So thank you.
Yeah, and they've got some more flavors coming out. Just like anything, if you use the same product for a really long time, you're ready for a change in flavors.
Yes.
So they have some new things coming out, some different types of flavors. And yeah, I mean, sometimes you're craving something sweet. Sometimes you want something salty. Sometimes you want something bland. Those things change, you know, sometimes within the same workout, right?
Right.
So it depends on how
switch
long
bottles.
Yeah. Yeah. And now this event, this Everest thing, I will be doing a lot more solid foods. And I'm going to try to get really close to that 300 calories per hour, because it's going to be a huge output that I'm doing. So there'll be a little bit more time for digesting. And also the intensity will be lower. If my heart rate's 130, 140, I can do two things at once. You know, I can actually digest food and exercise. But a lot of the Xterras I do, like there's, you know, that a lot of the stuff that you're putting in is not going to be digested, especially if it's in a solid form, because you're just going too hard.
Gotcha. He was just burning through. So definitely gels, liquids, not necessarily bars.
Yeah, and you're really just trying to replace the carbohydrate. When you're working at that high intensity, I mean, most likely you're getting close to 100% carbohydrate burning. And once that runs low, then you're in trouble. Yeah. You're not trying to sit in a fat burning zone when you're really going for it.
Awesome. Hey, I just got a plug from one of the athletes that works with your brother Yarrow, Bodie Morgan, who's one of our top age groups in the region. So hello,
awesome.
Bodie.
Hey,
Thanks
Bodie.
for checking in. I'm sure Josiah and Yarrow appreciate your work, and you're going to have a great season, I'm sure. What about recovery? So after you do, an off-road try, what does that look like for you, and what do you recommend?
So I always use that 30-minute window. It's funny. So I'm a student of exercise science. I had an undergraduate degree and master's degree in exercise science. It's funny how these things change over the years, but it's the same science. So it's interpreting the same thing. And they used to say, well, it's an hour window, and now it's a 30-minute window. And really, it tapers down. And so that first 30 minutes, if you can get mostly carbohydrate, but a little bit of protein into the system, then your muscles, they're receptive. They're going to pack more of that carbohydrate back into the muscle cells.
Right.
And that's really what's going to help you recover faster. And when you're training hard, especially if you're racing also, it's all about how soon can I get back into training? How soon from one hard workout can I do my next hard workout? And so that recovery is critical. So if you can do one thing with your nutrition, it's that recovery nutrition, trying to get that in that 30-minute window, focusing on a carbohydrate. It can be a drink. So like the Ultragen drink that I have is really high in carbs. I mean, it's 60 grams of dextrose. And so this is not like something that you have with your breakfast on a regular basis. This is something that you have to earn, right? And so,
right.
And so it's, it's a 3-to-1 carbs to protein ratio. So 60 grams of carbs, 20 grams of protein. And that's a lot. But if you do a short workout, maybe you're doing half of that or something. And that can be real food too. That could be a bar. It could be a sandwich. Depends on timing of the day. If you're finishing your workout right before lunch, maybe you just go and you have lunch. But if you're doing your workout, say 2 in the afternoon, you're going to want to put something in your system right when you finish that workout, and then go ahead and have your dinner at a normal time.
Okay. Anything else in terms of supplementation or any other equipment that you use in your recovery process?
Not so much.
Okay. I mean, it's unique to each athlete that we talk to. So.
Yeah, and a lot of those recovery modalities, they require a fair amount of time. And so that's one luxury that I don't always have. It's not that I'm against them in any ways, but I think that, pick those that work for you, whether it's massage or the squeezy legs or muscle stimulation or a stretching routine or a yoga class. Don't try to do everything because then you have no time for training. But
right.
Keep a couple things in your routine. And I mean, I do stretch, I do some recovery things, but I'm really focused on the work. And the recovery modalities unfortunately are not as extensive as it could be. I don't recover like a pro. I don't take the naps. I don't get the 9 hours of sleep. That's not what I'm doing, unfortunately. So on that level, I actually identify a lot more with the working age grouper. My lifestyle is a lot more like that than it is like the pro without the family, without the job, with the 9 hours of sleep, the 2-hour nap. Like that's not what I'm doing.
It's a luxury. It'd be nice, but no.
Yeah.
So shifting gears, talking about equipment a little bit. One of the questions Steve Smith popped in. What's your bike setup for your off-road tries and anything that you do anything that you tweaked, use a dropper post or any other things that you've adapted or adjusted the bike to your preferences?
So I've been racing on the Scott Spark RC 900. Again, it's not a bike sponsor of mine, but it's the bike that I've been racing on the last couple of years. And as far as anything special, I mean, the bike itself is one of the lightest production full suspension bikes. And so I do better on a full suspension generally, unless it's a smooth climbing course, then you can go with a hardtail. But I don't have a dropper post. I've actually never used a dropper post, and I hear great things. Everybody loves a dropper post. But I'm not looking to add weight I'm not a weight weenie, but I don't need any more bells and whistles that just add weight to the bike.
Yeah, definitely.
And then as far as tires, I mean, generally I'm picking a tire for the course, but a lot of the courses that I'm racing on, I want a pretty fast rolling tire. Something that's 600, 700 grams. I'm not necessarily going for the lightest tire because that rubber is important. So I don't have a bike or a tire sponsor, but a lot of times I'm riding like a Maxxis tire, something like the Icon, something like the Ardent, but something that has a strong sidewall. I don't usually go for the lightest version of that tire. And that's just because I race a lot and I don't like to flat. I went through a couple years where I was flatting all the time, and there's certain tires that I can't ride. And so what you don't want to do is say, oh, what's the best World Cup mountain biker, who's 145 pounds and doesn't ever have to change a tire and has a pit crew. They're riding this, flimsy 400 gram tire. Maybe I should do that.
Right.
Like that's not going to work for you if you're 175 pounds and, you don't ride with the same kind of finesse, and you actually have to fix your own flats when you get one. So you want a little bit more confidence in that tread. Yeah.
Now that, and we said about sidewall and little extra weight is gold. We'll say that for the USA Tri Off-Road National course, wherever yonder, you definitely want to go with the better sidewalls. Looking at the Maxxis, for example, the Icon's great tires, but the stock tires, and I was running that, I just tried them. I'd gotten a set and I was destroying them. I was shredding them like they were silk.
Yeah.
And, went to the enhanced compound, and yeah, it's a little heavier, but you're right. You don't want to worry about flats in these courses. You want to be able to ride all the way. And I think that confidence that you're not going to have that to deal with is a game changer. I think you can be much more consistent, right, in terms of power. Yep. And just riding through the course. What about
tires and wheels have changed a lot. Tires and wheels have changed a lot in the last few years. And so, the trend is, going towards what a lot of the free riders and the all mountain riders are doing. But you also don't want to put, a 1,200 gram tire on your bike either. Right. And so, I might still be a little more old school with that. We used to ride 1.9 rear tires. I don't do that anymore. I ride a 2.2 width tire, and sometimes I'll even put a 2.35 or, something like that. And I know a lot of people are riding 2.4, 2.5, and that's that width tire and super low air pressure. And, you find a balance and you find what works for you. You talk to the locals if you're going to a course, but you take it for what it's worth. You also want to talk to the racers, the guys who are racing at a high level. And you want a cross-country race rig setup, because it is a timed event, right?
Yeah. What about at and I'll be going there for the first time. This will be the third time I've had a slot, but I'll be going to Worlds in Hawaii. Mm-hmm. And would you recommend a dual or a hardtail for that course?
That's a tough one. It used to always be a full suspension course back when we had it down in Wailea, mm-hmm. Where it was all lava rock. The flat potential is pretty low. So you actually saw a mix, and for the first time last year, they changed the course. And for the first time, you saw kind of a split in the men's field where we had a lot of the men pros were on hardtails, where they used to always be on full suspension. And then the women were mostly on hardtails for the weight. And now it was a little more 50-50 with the men's field. Some guys are riding hardtails, but Bradley Weiss won on a full suspension. So I don't know. I think that one's a toss-up. Same with like Ogden, where depends on your riding style. If you have a lot of finesse, you're a good technical rider, maybe you can get away with a hardtail. And I always say you can't beat the value of a hardtail 29er bike. But yeah, I think that's a tough call. I rode a full suspension last year, but I think I could have got away with a hardtail.
Okay. It's always interesting. I mean, certainly bike choice and tire choice and all those things. And then, of course, you have the mix of, part of the beauty or the curse of off-road tri is you never know what weather you're going to have and what those conditions are going to be. Is it going to be a perfect sunny, dry day, or are you riding in a monsoon?
Yeah, and last year we were all prepared for a dry course. It had been dry all week, and we had rain on race morning. And it wasn't – we didn't have time to change tires. The storm came in unexpected, 45 minutes before race start. Maybe even – so we're on the beach with our swim caps on, and all of a sudden just starts pouring rain. So nobody's running to change their tires or anything. So that was completely unexpected. But everybody was in the same boat. And I don't know, I think it usually is a wash, that type of thing.
Just be prepared. Be prepared. Anything else from a training or coaching perspective that that you're focusing on with your athletes right now?
Keep it interesting. I think these are unprecedented times. Some people are handling it really well, and that's the people that maybe have more experience and maybe exercise is more part of their DNA and part of their lifestyle, and they're not ready to give that up, and no matter what. And people that are just coming to me and, hey, I want to train for 6 months for this event. Well, that might be a little bit more of a challenge because now that event's gone and maybe it's not as high of a priority. But I think dig a little bit deeper, evolve your mindset. Why are you really doing this? Is this really just to do this one race, or is this really more about a healthy lifestyle? Is it about being a role model for your kids? Are you have something that is a little bit more long lasting for your as your motivation. That's what I think. And then also at the same time, let's keep it fun. Let's keep it interesting. Maybe there's, a little bit less structure. We don't have that race that's, 3 or 4 weeks away where we need to do A, B, C, but we know there will be a race, and we want to work on certain parameters. Some people, hey, let's work on your weaknesses. Let's shore things up. Other people, hey, maybe let's keep things a little more fun. Let's do a mountain bike ride where you ride how you feel, once or twice a week. And there's maybe not quite as much rigid structure in the training program.
Speaking of, road and mountain bike riding, how do you split that up in terms of typical ratio? Would you say either time? Probably.
Yeah, usually in the summer I'm about 50-50.
Okay.
With road and mountain, and I like to mix it up. And then also a lot of those structured workouts are a little bit better on the road bike, and that's where I'm going out and repeating the same climb, and I have a really specific intention for that type of workout. And then sometimes if I'm okay, I want to give those numbers a rest. I don't want to be locked into a power zone, but I want to do maybe a more interesting workout. Then I can take that onto the mountain bike and do the intensity there on a sustained climb. Or, it's out the window and this is a ride how you feel day. That's where I'll jump on the mountain bike for sure. Or a skill day, work on some skills, but I'm not, getting my heart rate too high. And then recovery days, zones 1, zone 2. Sometimes those are, for most people, most of the time, that's better on the road bike to put out that consistent, low to moderate intensity. And we need to throw some of those in there too. So in Colorado, it's a little bit different than other parts of the country, but we can't just climb, 3,000-4,000 vertical every single day because you have a lack of recovery. You're not going to adapt to that. You got to mix in some of that riding in the valley floor. Like, okay, let's stay in the valley. Let's stay on Highway 6 and let's do a out and back with a zone 1 heart rate. And you can let Joe Schmo blow by you on his TT bike or whatever. You drop the competitiveness and you go out and get a little bit of recovery. You have a heart rate cap that you don't exceed. So we got to mix those days in there also.
Okay. Thank you. Music is kind of a driving force for many of us. Do you have any top songs that kind of get you going on a workout or as you're heading towards a race?
Well, you'll be disappointed with this answer because I don't usually use music.
Okay.
Yeah, I never use music outside, and I'll use music in my classes that I teach. So my power-based Wahoo kicker classes that I do at the Weston, I'll have music going for there and for those. And usually people are pretty disappointed with my playlist. I really, I'll dig out the 90s alternative on Pandora and play some of those songs from the college days.
That works for me.
Yeah, so, but that doesn't work for everybody. I found out. Some people are the classic rock crowd. Some people want the hip hop and the So I don't know. I don't use a lot of music, but whatever motivates you.
Sounds good.
I don't judge.
Sounds good. So Josiah, I wanted to wish you the best of luck with your Everesting attempt. Look to hear from you and see how you do. I want to thank you again so much for joining the show, for being on Adventure Live. Make sure to tune in next week on Thursday at 1:30 for our next guest. Please like and follow the Facebook page and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Josiah, thank you so much. Really appreciate you making the time. And thank you so much for joining.
Appreciate it.
Have a great day.
All right, you as well. Get out there and train.